You paid $180 for that flight, $40 for a checked bag, $25 to pick a seat that doesn't crush your knees, extra for priority boarding, overpriced food in the terminal because you got there early and had nowhere else to be. By the time the trip started, the airline had charged you from every angle, so they must be making a fortune, right? Wrong. When your plane landed, after the fuel, the pilots, the flight attendants, the baggage crews, the gate rental, the aircraft, the maintenance, the software systems, and everything it took to keep 160 people alive at 35,000 feet. The airline made about $7 off of you, not 7%, $7. Roughly the price of a bad airport sandwich, and that's on a good day. Because when weather rolls in, or a crew member times out, or a mechanical issue grounds a plane for 2 hours, that $7 disappears. Sometimes the airline doesn't break even. Sometimes it loses thousands on a single flight before noon. So the real question isn't why flying feels expensive. It's how is this business alive at all? In 2008, something broke inside the airline industry. Oil prices spiked to nearly $150 a barrel, the highest they'd ever been. And airline after airline started hemorrhaging cash. Not slowly, fast. Delta, United, American. They'd all seen tough years before. But 2008 was different. Fuel had become so expensive that every flight was effectively operating at a loss. Some carriers simply stopped flying certain routes. Others filed for bankruptcy. And here's what made it especially brutal. The passengers didn't disappear. People still needed to travel. The planes were still flying. But the economics had collapsed so completely that even a full plane couldn't save you. That crisis forced the industry to confront something it had been quietly ignoring for decades. The entire model, sell a ticket, fly a person, collect the fare, was fundamentally broken, and the only way to fix it was to stop thinking of the ticket as the product. To understand how they fixed it, you first need to see just how broken the flight economics really are. Take a Chicago to Dallas flight, 2.5 hours, about 160 seats. Sounds routine. But before a single passenger boards, the airline is already deep in the red. The plane itself, a Boeing 737, the most common jet in American skies, lists for over $100 million. Most airlines don't own it. They lease it, and that lease runs around $400,000 a month, whether it flies 10 times that day or sits idle on the tarmac. The bill is the same. Then there's fuel. A 737 burns roughly 850 gallons of jet fuel per hour. On this 2.5-hour flight, that's over 2,000 gallons. At current prices, you're looking at around $5,000 just for the gas. On one flight. Then labor. And this is the part that surprises people. Labor has now overtaken fuel as the single biggest operating cost for U.S. domestic carriers, over a third of total expenses. On the plane, you've got 2 pilots and 4 or 5 flight attendants. But on the ground, the operation is enormous. Gate agents, baggage handlers, ramp crews, mechanics who certified the aircraft before dawn. Every single one of them is on the clock before you even check in. And we're not done. Landing fees at a major airport like O'Hare run about $2,000 just to touch the runway, calculated by the weight of the aircraft. Then there's gate rental, air traffic control navigation charges, catering, cleaning crews during the turnaround, each one a separate invoice, none of them large enough to be the problem alone. Together, they add up to somewhere between $15,000 and $17,000 for this single flight. A full plane at $180 a seat brings in roughly $29,000. That's about $12,000 left over, which sounds workable until you realize that's not profit. Not even close. That $12,000 has to absorb everything the airline does that isn't attached to this specific flight. Headquarters, IT, marketing, legal, customer service, training. Every flight the airline operates shoulders a slice of those overhead costs. When you layer it all in, the average net profit margin sits at roughly 3.5%. 3.5%. That is not a margin. That is a tightrope. And then something goes wrong. Our Chicago to Dallas flight gets delayed 2 hours. Weather completely outside anyone's control. That 2-hour delay wipes out more than the flight ever made, over $10,000 in direct expenses alone. Crew overtime, idle aircraft, stacking gate fees. Passengers who missed connections need rebooking. Some need hotel vouchers, meal vouchers. The plane, which was supposed to continue to Phoenix, is now running late, which means the Phoenix flight is delayed, and the passengers connecting from Phoenix to Portland miss their connection too. One weather delay in Chicago. Problems in 3 cities. That's what's called the domino effect, and it's not a rare edge case. It's Tuesday. With margins this thin and this many things that can collapse without warning, how does any of this survive? This is where the story gets genuinely interesting. The answer is that the airline industry quietly reinvented itself, and most passengers never noticed. In 2024, airlines worldwide collected $148 billion in what the industry calls ancillary revenue. That's everything that isn't the base ticket price: bag fees, seat selection, priority boarding, extra legroom, onboard food. And the biggest category of all, loyalty programs and co-branded credit cards. The 5 largest U.S. airlines, Alaska, American, Delta, Southwest, and United, generated $28 billion from loyalty programs alone in 2024. Not from flying people, from the cards in their wallets. Every time you swipe a Delta SkyMiles card at a grocery store, Delta gets paid. Every time someone signs up for a United card, United earns an acquisition fee from the bank. These people don't need to fly. The airline is making money whether they ever board a plane or not. And for some carriers, the ancillary business has completely overtaken the flight itself. Frontier Airlines generates 62% of its total revenue from fees and extras. More than half their income has nothing to do with the fare you paid to board the plane. Here's the part worth sitting with. Airfares today, adjusted for inflation, are roughly $200 cheaper than they were 30 years ago. Tickets got cheaper. Extras got more expensive. The passengers who pay for checked bags and better seats are, in effect, subsidizing the base fare for everyone else. So here's the complete picture: the flight itself, the fuel, the crew, the plane, the airport, the food, the technology, the maintenance, is almost a break-even proposition. Some flights lose money. Some barely make money. The margin is so thin that a single delay can erase it entirely. The airline isn't flying you from Chicago to Dallas to make money on the ticket. It's flying you there because a full plane keeps the loyalty program alive, because a loyal flyer becomes a cardholder, because a cardholder swipes that card hundreds of times a year at restaurants, at gas stations, at grocery stores. And every one of those swipes sends a small, quiet payment back to an airline you may not have thought about since you landed. The flight is the marketing. The card is the business. The global airline industry moves 5 billion passengers a year. It generates nearly $1 trillion in revenue. And after all of it, the planes, the fuel, the people, the airports, the delays, the weather, the fees, the overhead, the profit left over works out to about $7 per passenger. $7, the same number we started with. Except now you know exactly how hard that $7 is to keep. Your ticket was never really a transaction. It was an invitation into a financial system that runs on loyalty, on habit, on that card you barely think about, earning miles you might use someday on a flight that barely breaks even. If this made you look at that boarding pass differently, share it with someone who flies. Because most people who travel constantly have never once thought about what happens to their money between checkout and touchdown. And if you think short-haul economics are wild, long-haul flights are a completely different beast. Burning fuel for 15 hours straight, crossing entire oceans, that one's coming. The systems we move through every day are far more complicated than they appear. That's what we're here for. This has been Simple Histories Explained. We'll see you on the next one.